And cool. And this is one of my favorite parts. I love seeing where people are. So in the chat, if you could post where you are located, that'd be great. I'm going to go ahead and get started and get into it. So let me share my screen. Can you open that up for me, Will?
Done.
Thanks.
Dude, we got somebody from Singapore here.
All right, can everybody see it? My slide, my deck.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, cool, awesome. All right, welcome to National Modern Excel Power BI User Group. I am Sekou Tyler, along with Will Harvey and Michael McKinley. Thanks for joining our group. We meet once a month, not once a week. Announcements today, we have some announcements, go over what's new. Basic data modeling, if you have lunch, feel free to eat lunch and go on mute, please. And then maybe a social hour if you have time after the meeting. We stick around and kind of just, talk to one another. So up to you if you feel like staying after the meeting. So announcements, I don't think we have anything announcements. Oh, announcements, I didn't put a slide in here. Michael McKinley will be presenting at the Nashville Analytics Summit. What are the dates for that, Mike?
Sorry, it's October. Sorry, I should know that.
Yeah, kind of put you on the spot, my bad. But if you're local to Nashville, Nashville Analytics Summit, look it up online. There's a lot of good content there, a lot of good speakers. Michael will be out there and a lot of good stuff is going on. There's also past Saturdays are starting to ramp back up. I might be messing up the hashtag, but there is a lot more stuff starting to pick up since SQL Saturday stopped. But past Saturday, I think it might be the proper hashtag. I don't know, I get the proper name of it and put it in the meetup. But there are starting to be more online events that are happening within the community. Over the meetings. So today we have Michael McKinley. We are filling out the rest of the meetings. So as soon as we have them, we will post them online and let you know we have a really good lineup coming. We're just trying to confirm the date. So as soon as we have the information, we will post it out for everybody. If you're not a part of our YouTube channel, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We post our monthly meetings on there. So if you get a chance to just check it out, you can see the stuff that we have had. And we've had some really good meetings. We've had some really good content. I think a lot of useful stuff in there. So follow us, subscribe, and you'll be able to see the stuff that we have posted. All right, job opportunities. I don't think we have any recruiters on, but if your company is hiring, now's the time to say something and mention it if you have any opportunities where you're at now. Okay, well, I'll leave that open. And if you have anything, feel free to post it in the chat as well so everybody can see it. So we'll go into that. And then going to what's new. So in August, Power BI had an update. I'll be going over a couple of them, but the two major things from a reporting standpoint, there is a customized shape formatting that's pretty cool. There's a lot of in-house shapes that are available now. There's an x-axis constant line improvements that I'll go over. Data sensitivity, data modeling. So there's a new stuff expressing date and date time values. And then data connectivity. So as always, being able to connect the data is a really big deal. So there's been a lot of updates to be able to connect to some of this stuff. So if anybody's using Google BigQuery or Databricks or One Data Flow, then there are some updates there. And then from a service perspective, sensitivity labels, public preview for Power BI REST API, which is really cool if you have a chance to look into that. Mobile, new mobile report footer, and then visualizations. There are some new ones that are pretty cool. The new Power BI visual store experience. The timeline one's really cool, and the drill down graph pro by Zoom Charts is a nice one. So quickly, I'll go into the update just to show you what that looks like. So the two that I'll be looking at will be the customized shape formatting and the x-axis constant line improvement. Cool. So what this has is with the shape, the shape portion. If you go into Power BI, if you haven't done anything, you can come in here and bring in shapes on the Power BI. So if you click here, you can bring in a shape. What they've added is they've added some now additional shapes. So what you see here is you click on it, you see these that are available. But if you actually go into the formatting option, you can change some of the shapes right here on the fly. So if I select hexagon, you can do that, do oval, you can change, to peel, so on and so forth. So they added just a whole bunch of different options that are available for you within here. So that's pretty cool. And then you can do some more formatting depending on the type of shape that you pick. So if you want to do, say, rounded edges, you can do that, arrowhead size. So a lot of different formatting stuff as well. Colors still there. So, just a whole bunch of stuff in the format. That's really cool. So without you having to embed and download a lot of shapes, they kind of give you a little bit more flexibility here in-house. So that's a really cool one. This next one is X-line constants. So pretty much if you have, say, a visual in here, I did this for you already, but if you come in here, I'm just using a sample data set from Power BI. This is the financial services. For this example, I just hard-coded the date value that I wanted to highlight. So this is just May 5th. So some of the things that they have added is just if you want to change the line color, you can change the line color to that. And then if you want to change the line style, you can do that. But now they have this positioning thing in here. So if I wanted to highlight the area, I can say whether I do behind or if I do in front, it will highlight the information in the position. And then the shade region would be before or after. So if I did before, I want to call it out. If I wanted to do after, it would change that information. And then you can change the color and the transparency. So there is some custom formatting. So if you're having a dynamic value, you could update how this line looks before and after. But this is just one of the things with the x-axis that gives you a little bit more insight, especially if you're doing any type of forecasting or any type of stuff with a line chart. This could be a powerful thing to kind of add some contextual information in here.
Seiko, I noticed in the chat there was 2 job openings at the Health Trust supply chain analytics team, and they put it in the chat. So I just wanted to mention that for people looking out for jobs.
Awesome. Thanks. Good call out. All right, so Power BI Paginate Reports, a couple updates that I saw. The Paginate Report visual for Power BI Reports is available for public preview. This is a bit of an older one, but just kind of want to call it out again. If anybody's using Power BI Paginate Reports, that's there. And then there are some additional sample reports available if you're trying to get your feet wet and learn paginated reports. With Power Apps, so Power App Updates is public preview for in-app notifications and model-driven apps. So basically, notifications are sent by creating a record in the notifications table for the user and the table API or Power Automate. And then you're able to write Power FX formulas with natural language. So natural language, being able to type and come up with formulas. That's a really cool update. And then public preview of custom pages for conversion model-driven apps and Canvas apps. And then within Power Automate had an update as well. So there's actionable connectivity, error messages in console and designer. One thing that I think that's really cool are some of these new Excel actions that are really nice. So you can get the active cell in Excel worksheet, get a column name, delete from the Excel worksheet itself, find and replace cells in Excel worksheet. So that's really cool. And then improvements of the action set screen resolution. So if you're doing anything in Power Automate desktop, you can kind of update the screen resolution, and there's some rules and stuff that you can do there. So pretty cool updates if you're using Power Automate, especially with the Excel stuff. I think that's a really cool update that's available. And then we have our Power Platform Bootcamp. So, if you are completing that, let us know. All the information is in the slides with the PDF, and there's just a lot of good stuff that we have out here in the bootcamp. And with that, I will pass it to Michael, who will be presenting basic data modeling for BI reporting. Michael is brilliant. He's really smart. He does a lot of great things with data modeling. This is an introduction off the top of my head. He will present it. And like I said, at the National Analytics Summit, he will be presenting this, but really, he's a really brilliant guy who understands these concepts. So I'm really excited to look at this one and learn way more from him.
Well, thank you, Sekou. The check's in the mail. I appreciate that introduction. I'm one of the leaders of the user group with Sekou and Will. I get the pleasure of working with two extraordinary gentlemen to help lead this group. But I haven't. Well, I presented to the group several times in the past. It's been a little while. Will or Sekou, do you guys remember when the last time was I presented this? I think it's been a couple of years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So this is a talk that I've given a few times in the past, and I've had some positive feedback about this talk before, and so hopefully it will be useful for you guys. So admittedly, we probably won't take up the entire time, so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, probably some time to give you guys back at the end. But I also just want to say that this is going to be I think a somewhat basic introduction to data modeling. And in particular, I don't have any interest in telling you guys to do this, do that. This is how you data model. I want to focus on why you do it the way that you do it. Because, invariably, eventually you're going to encounter some scenario that no one's told you about, and you'll be like, well, I don't know what to do about this. And so I think that if we cover the why behind it, that's a much more useful way of doing it. In understanding the why behind why we data model the way that we do, it is important, it is intrinsically important to understand how the VertiPack engine works. And so you can think of Power BI as sort of three things, a combination of three things. So it's Power Query, it's the ETL language, so it's an ETL tool. So how do we get data from where it is, reshape it in the way that we want, and put it into our data set, our data model. And then there's the data model itself. So that's the VertiPack engine. And so if you've never heard of that, that's sort of the secret sauce that makes Power BI what it is. And then there's the reporting layer. And Power Query is great because it's got these 300 or 400 connectors now. I lose track of how many there are. All these different, Microsoft and third-party solutions. So that's a really useful tool. But honestly, there are other great ETL tools out there as well. The reporting layer, I think, is very mature. Tableau's got a great, very mature reporting layer as well. The thing that really makes Power BI excel and stand out is that tabular engine, that VertiPack engine. And so if you hear me refer to as a tabular engine, VertiPack engine, it's the Power BI engine, the data set, the data model, these are all sort of different terms to talk about the same thing. And understanding the way that technology works is important to understanding why it is we data model the way that we do, because that functionality really informs how we data model and why. So what I want to do is I want to sort of go on a bit of a journey here that I think many people may have been on themselves or may be in the process of going through a journey of how of how you learn to more and more in Power BI. That sort of maturity curve in Power BI and how you get to the next level. So I had the pleasure of giving this talk at SQL Saturday BI Austin in January of 2020, and Alberto Ferrari was actually in the room that day, and came to hear me talk about data modeling. So how intimidating is that, right? And so afterwards, he was telling me that he was talking to some Microsoft engineers, and they told him that the average data set Power BI had something like 1.1 tables in it. So just think about that for a second. Like, in order to have a data set, you have to have at least one, right? You can't have 0 tables in a data set. That doesn't make any sense. So to have 1.1, and you can have a data set with 20, 100 tables in it or more. If there is a limitation to how many tables you can have, a technical limitation, I don't know what it is. It's certainly beyond anything that's practical. And so, so to have 1.1 or whatever it is tables per data set, what that means is that basically almost everybody is just bringing in some sort of export from another system, probably, or an Excel file or something like this, and they're bringing it into Power BI as some massive flat file and working on it there, and then never reusing it, never reusing that data set, never building things that are more complex. And when they have another problem, then they just rebuild it again. They create the same ETL logic, the same DAX logic. They store much of the same data over and over again. And so what I want to do is I want to try to talk about how we can start to take advantage of having multiple tables to solve some of the problems that we might encounter, and to do some slightly more advanced analytics. And so I want to go on this journey of an analyst, of sort of a day in the life of an analyst who's working in a business intelligence or a data analyst role. So let's say, in a pre-COVID world, it's the morning, and you need that cup of coffee. You're in the office, and you're like, I'm going to go get some coffee. So you head down to the commissary, and you stand about a coffee machine, and it's pouring your coffee, and your boss comes up to you and he says, hey, just got this request from the CEO. He wants to know about total internet sales. Can you generate a report in Power BI about total internet sales? You say, yeah, sure, I can do that. I can take care of that. I got you covered. And so you go back to your desk and you pull up, with your fresh big cup of coffee, and you pull up your system of truth, whatever that is, some ERP system, SQL Server. You email somebody else who can write this query, or you write it yourself, whatever the situation may be. And you so you generate a CSV file. So let me share my screen here. And so Will, can you confirm that you're seeing Power BI?
Yes, I can. I was on mute, sorry.
Great, thank you very much. So you go back to your desk, you run this query, and you get a CSV file that has the data that you want to analyze. And you say, and so now we're going to bring it into Power Query. So I've got the query already written over here, because nobody wants to waste their lunch watching me, code, punch around in Power Query. So we're going to sort of, like a cooking show, we're going to cheat this just a little bit. We're going to go into Power Query and launch a blank query here. And I'm going to rename this query to Internet Sales. And we're going to go into the advanced editor, and I'm just going to grab all of this, we'll paste this code here, and we'll hit done. And I'll walk you through what this does really quickly. So this is just going to grab that CSV file that I exported from my system of truth, and we promote headers, we change data types. And I've already taken the time to sort of make sure that this is kind of how I want it to be for this demo. So imagine that that you worked on the query before, and you've got this just the way that you want it. And so we're going to say close and apply, and we'll let this refresh for just a second. And I'm going to grab some DAX code over here. And so now we've got our internet sales data, and we're going to create a new measure here. And we'll paste this in. And our new measure is called total internet sales. And the total internet sales, the way that this is going to work, and let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. The way this is going to work is it's going to sum down the sales amount column of the internet sales table. And so I'm going to try my best to enumerate this, to enunciate this as much as possible. And you'll hear me say things more than once. So but there's a reason why I want to be very careful about the way that I say these things. So it's this DAX function is going to sum down the sales amount column of the internet sales table. Now, a quick note about a Power BI data set: you can have a whole bunch of tables in a Power BI data set, at least one, but you cannot have two tables with the same names. You can have a bunch of tables, a bunch of columns in a table, but you cannot have any two columns in the same table with the same name. But you can have columns with the same name, but in different tables. And so while you could only specify the sales amount column, and Power BI would find it, you always want to specify the internet, the table that the column is in. As a best practice, you always want to do that, because what's going to happen is sooner or later, you're going to add another table with a sales amount column in it, and Power BI is not going to know which one to look for. And in fact, we will do that a little bit later on in this presentation. So that's why we always want to call out the table and the column whenever you are citing a column. So we'll accept this measure, and we're going to create a table visual here, and pull this up, and we're going to bring in product name, because we wanted to see it by product name, and we'll bring in this new measure that we had. And it's a little hard to see, so we're going to punch up the font, font size a little bit. All right, hopefully that's good enough. If you guys are having trouble seeing that, just give me a holler. And so we have this report, and it looks good, it looks right. The figures seem to be about the right, about what you'd expect. You remember someone, you may even remember some of these figures from some previous work that you've done, and you say to yourself, "Yep, I've got this. We're good to go. We're finished." And you take this back to your boss, and you say, "Here you go, boss. Here's my report." Admittedly, a very ugly report. This is not necessarily a presentation on visualization of best practices. But you give the boss the report, and you say, here you go. This is what you asked for. And the boss says, "Yeah, this is good. This is what I asked for." The CEO came back, and she said that she also wants to see total reseller sales as well. So can you give me total reseller sales just as another column in the same table? You say to yourself, "Yeah, sure, no worries, I can do that." So you go back to your desk. It's almost lunchtime. What do you think to yourself? No worries, I can get this knocked out. So you go back to your system of truth, and you run another query. You generated another CSV file, and so now you're going to bring in some more data. So let's bring up another blank query here. And we're going to call this query reseller sales. And again, if no one wants to watch me mess around in Power Query, we're just going to paste this script in. This is doing the exact same thing as the other one. So I just took a little bit of time before this presentation to make sure that this is exactly the way that I want it. And so all we're doing is we're bringing in this reseller sales table, this reseller sales CSV file, excuse me. And then we're going to promote headers and assign a data type, and that's pretty much it. And so then we'll just close and apply. We'll let that load for a second. And I'm going to grab some DAX code over here. And we will say new measure, and we'll paste this in place. And so now we're going to create a new measure called total reseller sales. And this measure is going to sum down the sales amount column of the reseller sales table. So it's going to sum down the sales amount column of the reseller sales table. So remember I was talking about how you can have multiple columns in the same data set with the same name, but just a different table. So this is why you always want to call out your table name as well. So we're going to go ahead and accept that. And we will bring over our newly created measure into that field well. And you think to yourself, all right, we're done. And you look at this and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. This isn't quite right. We had 39,000 change in the all-purpose bike stand for internet sales, but 80 million in reseller sales. And we also had the same 80 million for AWC low cap and everything else down the list. Say to yourself, well, this can't be right. Well, what's going on? What's wrong with this? So what I want to do now is explain why this isn't working. And so the way the way to explain why this isn't working the way that you would expect it to work, we have to go through an explanation of how the VertiPack engine is doing what it does and how it functions. So I want to sort of walk you through what's going on here behind the scenes. So the first thing it's going to do is let's focus on this first value here, this total internet sales for all-purpose bike stand, because that one seems to be working, right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to pass in something called a filter context. And so in this case, the filter context is the product name column and the internet sales table equals all-purpose bike stand. So what it's going to do, if we go to the data table here, and we go to the internet sales table, and we can filter this table on all-purpose bike stand. We hit OK. We'll see that we're passed through that filter context 249 of these 60,000 plus rows. And what the VertiPack engine is going to do is it's going to sum down the sales amount column in the internet sales table. Why is it going to do that? Well, because that's what the measure says it's going to do. It's going to sum down the sales amount column in the internet sales table as it's filtered from that filter context. So it sums down the sales amount column in the internet sales table as filtered down these 249 rows, and it comes to a sum of 39,591. It goes to the next value, and it passes in a new filter context of AWC logo cap. And so if we filter the product name column in the internet sales table to AWC logo cap, it's now going to pass in 2,190 records, and it's going to sum down the sales amount column in the internet sales table. And it's going to come to a value of 19,688.10, and it'll pass in a new filter context for black wash dissolver and classic vest large, and so on and so forth, all the way down the list. And that's how you get the values that you expect. And it seems to be working. So why is the reseller sales not working? So what it's doing here is it's passing in a filter context of product name column and the internet sales table equals all-purpose bike stand. So if we go back to the internet sales table and we filter the product name table to all-purpose bike stand, we hit OK. We're going to pass through these 249 rows. Well, then what it's going to do is it's going to go to the reseller sales table, the whole table that we haven't filtered yet, and it's going to sum down the sales amount column, the entire column for the entire unfiltered table, and it's going to sum that column for all 61,000 rows. That's why you get the total amount of internet sales for the entire table, because you haven't properly passed in the filter context. So maybe you say to yourself, okay, well, we just need to add, we just need to add a new, a new product name. So let's say we get rid of the product name from the internet sales and we add in product name from the reseller sales. Well, so now the reseller sales is correct, so you fix that, but you created the same problem under internet sales. You haven't really fixed the problem, you just sort of shifted it around a little. So how do we get them both to work? And so you think to yourself, well, maybe, we need to add, we need to have product name from both columns. So let's grab product name from the internet sales, we'll put that back in here. And now you see something a little odd. And so this is what is known as a Cartesian product. And this is definitely not what you want. These figures are technically correct, but this is not something that you want to send to your CEO, for example. They're going to send this back to you and tell you to do it over. What's happening here is this is going through every permutation, every combination of product name and AWC logo cap, and it is computing them correctly, you'll see. So these are the correct values for the product name, and this is the correct value for this AWC logo cap for reseller sales. And and we'll scroll down a little, and once we get to the end of the values for internet sales product name, you'll see that they start over. Once you get to the second value for the reseller sales, and then now you see black wash dissolver over and over again, and the internet sales product name sort of starts over, and you see the same values from before, and now you see the reseller sales for the black wash dissolver. Technically, these values are accurate, but it's definitely not the result that you want. And so, you're kind of, frustrated, and it's getting late in the afternoon, and bosses want the result, and so you ask yourself, well, what do you do, right? So you call a friend, and the friend says, I have a solution for you. So the friend says that we actually need to run a third query. So we go back to our data system in True. We're going to run another query here. And I'll grab the same script, and we're going to create another blank query. and we'll call this query product. And I'm going to go to the advanced editor and we'll paste in that code again, and we'll hit done. And again, it's just doing the same thing. So bring in this this product CSV file, and it's going to promote headers, and it's going to change data types. Now, I just want to point out one thing really quickly here. You'll notice that this doesn't say product.csv, it says demproduct.csv. And you'll also probably notice that under the internet sales, it says fact internet sales.csv. Under the reseller sales, it says under the reseller sales, if you go to source, it says fact reseller sales.csv. This is a common construct that you'll see very often, where it's what's known as dimensional data modeling, this type of data modeling that we're doing. And the names fact and dimension are used very often to denote what the table is trying to convey in terms of the information that it's giving you. So a lot of people will actually leave the words fact and dimension, or oftentimes dim for dimension, or a short name for dimension, in the name of the table to tell you whether it's a fact table or a dimension table. Personally, I don't like leaving it in there. For one thing, you can have tables that serve as both a dimension table and a fact table. You can have sort of intermediaries from time to time. Things are not always quite so cut and dry, and the name can be a little bit misleading in those scenarios. But the other thing is, in a world where we want to promote self-service business intelligence, where we might want to share this with someone else, if that someone else is not necessarily technically savvy, a word like fact reseller sales, or something like dim product or dim date, or dim territory, what have you, might be a bit confusing. It might be a bit technical, and it might throw some people off, right? It's not very inviting. And so that's one reason why I always encourage people to take off the dim and fact prefixes and just focus on what this table is really about. And this product table is about products, naturally, right? And so there's something important to understand about this table. Is a concept called grain. And what grain means, grain as in granularity, the grain of the table is, in the product table, you have one row per product, right? So each row is a different product, and no product is in there more than once. So let me close and apply this, and you'll see in just a moment how this comes into play. Let's go to the data modeling view, and you'll see that Power BI has created two relationships for me. And typically it does an okay job. I always like to build them myself because sometimes it's not entirely correct. And I just want to make sure that I have a good handle on what it's doing. So I'm going to move these around a little bit. And I want to sort of walk through what this is doing. So what we've done here is we've created two one-to-many relationships. So this is the one-to-many relationship, and this is the one-to-many relationship. How do I know that? Because you've got a 1 here and an asterisk with meaning many over here. So the reason that this is the one side of a one-to-many relationship is that, as I said, the grain of this product is one product per row, one row per product. And so the products are unique, and so we link these via the product key. And so the product key in the internet sales and the reseller sales tables essentially function as a foreign key. And so actually you can sell a product multiple times, right? Many times. And so the product key may be in there hundreds, millions, billions of times, depending on the nature of the data and how much data they're bringing in. And so, so that's why this is on the mini side of the relationship. You'll notice this little arrow here. What this means is that this is a single cross-filter direction. And so I will get into that a little bit later. But let's first of all fix this report for our boss. So if we go back to the reporting layer, we're actually going to get rid of both of these two product names here. And we're going to go to the product table. and we'll find product name and we'll drag this in to the field well. And now we're getting the results that we sort of expect. So the question is why, right? Why is this working, but the other way didn't work? So that's what I want to go through for the next few minutes. So let's take a look at this AWC logo cap. The reason I want to look at this one is because it has value for both internet sales and reseller sales. So what's going to happen is it's going to pass in the filter context of product table, product name column equals AWC logo cap. And so what's going to happen is if we go to the product table and we filter product name column to AWC logo cap, we get 3 results. And in particular, because this relationship, both of these relationships are keyed off of the product key column, that's what connects them. I want to focus on the product key column. And in fact, we return 3 unique product keys, 222, 220, 223, 224, and 225. And so if we focus on this first relationship here, this single cross-filter direction, what that means is that filter context, product key equals 222, 223, 224, and 225, flows down to the internet sales table, and will then filter this internet sales table, in effect, by product key equals 223, 224, 225. And so if we go to the internet sales table, and we clear the existing filters, and we filter the product key column to only show 223, 224, and 225. Well, there's only 225. So if we hit OK, and then it returns 2,190 records. That number should be familiar. And then the DAX function is going to do what it normally does over this table as the filter context has been passed through. So if we look on the DAX measure, again, we'll see that it is going to sum down the sales amount column of the internet sales table as that filter context has passed through. So with that filter context, we sum down the sales amount column. We come up to a total, and we put that value right here, 19,688.10. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pass that same filter context of product key equals 223, 224, and 225 down to the reseller sales table. So we'll filter the reseller sales table as well, and we'll say product key equals 223, 224, and 225. And then we'll perform the same DAX function. We will sum down the sales amount column of the reseller sales table as that filter context passes through. We'll come up to a total of 31,541.35. And we move on to the blackwash dissolver. We filter the product table to product name equals blackwash dissolver. And so let's actually do that. So if we come to the product table and we filter this to blackwash dissolver, then we see a product key of 484. That filter context then gets passed down to the internet sales and the reseller sales tables. The DAX function computes over them and comes up with these sums, and the process repeats all the way down the table. So that is the nature of what's happening and the way that the VertiPack engine functions, right? And so that is why we have this need for a dimension table that is a product table that will speak to both of the sales tables that we want to sum up. We need one unifying table, like I say, the product table, that we can filter on, and then that will flow down and filter all the other tables consistently and allow our DAC calculation to work in the manner in which we would expect. Let's take a look if we switch out product name for, say, product subcategory. So let's take a look at bike racks. So if we go to the product table and let's clear this stuff out, and we go to product subcategory, equals bike racks, and we hit OK, then we get a product key of 483. Same thing is going to happen. That filter context is going to flow down to the internet sales table, the reseller sales tables, and then you get these results here. And so whatever value that you put in here, the same thing is working. You're going to pass in a filter context to the product table, and then these relationships here will dictate the manner in which that filter context flows down to these fact tables over which the DAX measure is computed. There are a number of ways that that filter context can enter. So you'll see here that we have these row headers, but you can also have column headers. So I could put year, for example. I could put sales territory. I could put a geography, put product color, whatever we want. And so that would be an additional filter context. And so it is an additive function. So think of a Venn diagram in your head, and you have sort of one filter and another filter. It's what would pass through is where both of those filters allow records to pass through. So essentially, you're sort of filtering out everything else, right? And so when you apply both of those filters, it's only going to let through the things that work for both of the filter contexts, or all the filter contexts that you apply. The filter context doesn't only have to come from what is in the visual. You can also apply a filter over here to the actual visual itself. So if let's say we put the product name back in here, and we add product subcategory to the filter pane, and then we were to only show put a good one here. Say we only showed mountain bikes, and so now if we look at this value, now you have two filter contexts. You have both product subcategory and you have product name that would come into play when filtering down the product table. You can have multiple tables that are connected. So I didn't take the time to bring in a date table, but if I had, then you could apply a date table. You could connect the date table to the internet sales table and the reseller sales table, and then you could pass in a filter context that is within a date. So let's say you wanted to see sales for 2020, and then it would. So that's an additional filter context that would get passed down, and the Vertex engine would compute this for every single permutation and give you the results. There's another way that the filter context can get passed through, and that is through the calculate function. So the calculate function can actually allow you to hard code a filter context into the DAX measure. And so I can create a DAX measure called total red internet sales, and say calculate total internet sales where product color equals red. And what that would do is, it would add an additional filter context in addition to whatever else is applied, and it would only show you the rows where product color equals red. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that something where a lot of people go wrong with that is that they'll put as one of their column headers, for example, product color, and they'll show all the product colors, and they'll have green, and the value will be blank, and they'll say, well, why is it blank? And the answer is, well, you're computing red, the total internet sales for red products, and and if you pass in through the DAX measure, through the calculate function, where the product color equals red, but then through the visualization, you're passing in a filter context where it equals green. Remember, if you go back to that Venn diagram, if never the twain shall meet, then what happens is you filter the product table down to 0 records. And the DAX function then, and that then filters down to the internet sales and reseller sales tables. And the DAX function filters over those tables, also showing 0 records. And so that's why you would get a blank value. Essentially, that's actually what has happened here, is that there are no values in the internet sales table for which the product subcategory equals mountain bikes, and product name equals Mountain 300 Black 38. And so what you've done is you've filtered the internet sales table down to 0 records. The DAX function performs over a table of 0 records and says, well, I can't do that. And it returns a blank value. So that is the basic idea behind how we data model and why we do it the way that we do. One last note that I think is valuable to me that I always try to do. This is something that Rob Colley called out in his book, is to put the one-sided relationship physically above the many-sided of the relationship. And what that does is it provides a visual cue that the filter context flows downhill to the tables underneath. And it's a good way to communicate quickly what that filter context is doing and why you model the data model the way that you have. So like I said, it's much more important to understand the why behind how you do it than how you do it. Whenever you think about how you want to data model your data model, how you want to model your data model, think about the way that the VertiPack engine is functioning, and let that be your guide, particularly whenever you get to any complex measures. Always go back to, or complex situations, always go back to how the VertiPack engine is functioning, and then let that be your guide to how you solve the problem in the right way. So like I say, that was a short presentation. So we have plenty of time for Q&A. Happy to take any questions that you have, or we can just give you a bit of your lunch hour back. Are there any questions?
I have a question, Mike.
Yeah.
So with data modeling, what would you say like are some really key things to kind of look out for when you're either taking on a model, building out a new model, so on and so forth? Like, what are some things to really look out for?
Yeah, so what I would start out doing is trying to understand the brain of, so first of all, trying to understand the things that you want to talk about. And so we knew that we wanted to talk about internet sales, we knew we wanted to talk about reseller sales, and we knew that we wanted to talk about product. And so a lot of times what I'll do is sort of start at the finish line and mock up a straw man of what the report might look like. And I mean, literally pencil on paper or whatever it is, draw it up. It can be dirty, it can be, clumsy. But I've seen countless times people go away and build, spend all day or a week building some massive report. They come back to their stakeholder, and the stakeholder says, no, this doesn't answer my question. This is not helpful. Do it over again. And you wasted all that effort and you got to come back and do it all over again. And so what I find to be very, very useful is when that request is made, in that moment, draw up a report or multiple reports, multiple pages to the report, whatever it is, and ask the person, does this answer your question? Now, they may not perfectly know whether or not it answers the question, but it's a good first shot at understanding, yes, it does answer the question, or no, it doesn't. Typically, in fact, it's much better at answering no, it doesn't answer the question. And then you at least know that there's a good chance that what is on the paper, what's on the dry erase board, is going to help you answer the question at hand. It's going to help you answer what it is that the stakeholder is asking. And then once you've drawn it up, you can go back to your desk and you can look at the various things that are on the visuals. And so that's going to tell you two things. It's going to tell you, number one, what those dimensions are. So the dimensions are the things by which you want to slice the data. So, so in this case, product, I want to see the sales by product, by year, by color, by geography, by salesperson, by territory, by store, right? Whatever that is, right? Those are the dimensions by which you want to slice the data, by which you want to report the measures. So that's the first thing that tells you what those dimensions are. And then secondly, it tells you it tells you what the measures are that you want to calculate. And so let's say that you draw up, a stack column chart, right? And so the stack column chart would automatically tell you what's on the axis, what is the separator, the legend, what's the separator that separates the stacks, right? So that's 2 dimensions in the one visual, and it also tells you what is the calculated measure. So what are you measuring there, right? So sales, product count, whatever it is that you want to measure. That's the thing that's in the fact table that you're going to count or add or average or whatever the case may be. And so that then tells you the data that you need to have. And so in our case, it tells us that I need to have reseller sales, I need to have internet sales, and I need to have product, because I'm going to slice internet sales and reseller sales by product. And so that then tells me, okay, I need to go get internet sales, I need to go get reseller sales, and I need to go get product. And so then you go back to wherever that is, and you get that data. So that now we're into the ETL process, right? So we sort of started the finish line of a visualization that's going to answer the question. You design backwards to where the data resides currently, and now we're going to sort of build forward. And so what that means is that now you know the data that you need, and hopefully you know where it is. And if not, you need to go find it. And then you start collecting the data, reshaping the data, and this is when you start using Power Query to build, to transform the data, reshape it, and then get it into your data model. And then once it's in the data model, then you can start designing these relationships, building your calculated measures, and then at the last step, you actually start building the visualizations, building the report. And then you go back to your stakeholder and you say, here's the report that I've built. Give me feedback. This is answer your question. And hopefully, if you've done the first step well, then they'll say, yes, this answers my question. Here's my, but here's some other questions that I didn't think about or that I've thought about in the intervening time, or sometimes they just may not understand what they need. And so there's always some back and forth, some updates and changes, and then, and so you sort of repeat the process and you keep refining and refining. But so when you think about what it is that you want to talk about, the products, the product and the internet sales in this case, right? Or the dimensions and facts more generally. So you want to think about what the grain of each of these tables is. And so in this case, the grain of the product table is one product, right? So each row is one product. The grain of the internet sales table is, I believe, each transaction. And so each line is a transaction in whatever the source system that it is. And so for sales, it could be either transaction or it could be items sold, right? And so you could have, like if you have one transaction that has 3 items, you might have a table that just has the transaction and has the total sales amount, and you might have another table that says within that transaction, here are the different items that were purchased, that enumerates it. And you need 2 different tables for that, for example. And this is a situation where that sales table could function as both a fact and a dimension table, because the one that breaks it out is going to be more granular. The one that breaks it out by items is going to be more granular than the one that shows it by transaction. And then you might want to then have another. You might want to connect that to a table for store, a table for geography, a table for salesperson, a table for date, so on and so forth. So those are some of the things that I typically think about. As I say, start at the finish line and work your way and design your way back to where the data is currently, and then build your way forward. So start with a mock-up of what you think is going to work, and then ask the question, is this going to answer your question for you? And then design back to where the data is and go forward and deliver the final product. I don't know the long answer.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Hey, Michael, just a quick question. Say that you're not lucky enough to have, your dimension defined in a data warehouse somewhere, and you've got essentially 2 fact tables, maybe from different systems. What's a good way to handle that? Creating your dimensions other than, like appending the queries and getting distinct values or something. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, that was a little tough. You kind of got to get a little creative on that one. I mean, those are situations that, like, as an engineer, it just kind of irked me, because like I know that there's a better way to do it, and that's the solution that I wind up building in those scenarios are going to be susceptible to failure for a number of reasons, and so you have to keep a watchful eye. I mean, they're solvable, but they're a little less resilient than the ideal solution would be. But what you'd probably do, what I would probably do in that scenario is, if there's not some source of, so let's say in this case product, if there's not some source of product, that I can get from other places, at the very least, we still need a product table that would provide that the filter context and allow that to flow down to both of the fact tables. And so what you can do is you go into Power Query and essentially just create duplicates and remove everything but the product key or product name or product key needs something that's unique. And then it's append the 2, deduplicate, and then that would at least give you, a table, a product table with the green of 1 row per product, and then you need some way to match these up, right? And so a big problem you're going to have here is that you may have products with overlapping product names, for example. And so how do you deal with that? How do you connect that back to the internet sales table and so forth? So that can be a bit of a struggle there, but that's probably what I would do. If I couldn't find it some other way, then I'd probably just find all the unique product values in each of the 2 tables and append them, deduplicate, and connect it that way. Again, it's kind of a not ideal solution, but it would technically work.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I feel like I guess it's called a conform dimension when it's between 2 different data sources or 2 different fact tables. And that's really the hard work of dimensional modeling, is how do those systems come together? And it is almost, you have to know the systems, and sometimes you even need a person to fill out a spreadsheet with the answers. There's not a way to transform the data. You need some intelligence to match them up. So I feel like that's the hard work, is that those types of dimensions. So that's a good question. Yeah. I think there are some best, rules to follow, but sometimes you just have to know the data, and whatever will accomplish that merge, whether it be manual intervention, sometimes you have to go there. So that is the hard work.
Yeah, for sure. And any other questions?
Thanks a lot, Michael. That was super helpful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Admittedly, it is a bit basic, so I know that some people, this may be old hat, but hopefully for some people, this is helpful. I know I've encountered this problem before when I was first starting out in Power BI, and probably everybody, who's worked in it for very long has encountered this, at least once. And that thing where like every value in the column is exactly the same. It's a common problem. Even if it's not that problem, whatever you're trying to troubleshoot DAX, troubleshoot something in Power BI, go back, or trying to design a data model, right? Go back to the way that the Vertipack engine works and step through it piece by piece by piece. And very often that will tell you eventually, that will get you to where the problem is coming from and tell you how to fix it.
Awesome. Well, if I could read one thing, Sekou, real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
This is just a fun thing at the end here. So I don't know if some of you remember Lisa Collins from when we met in person. Do you guys remember Lisa, Michael or Sekou?
Vaguely?
Yeah, kind of ringing a bell, but not really.
So she came a good amount. She was a member since 2014, but she sent me a message and said, hey, Will, I just wanted to let you know that I'm removing myself from this group. I retired at the end of March, and my husband and I have moved to Portugal. We are living in a small beach town on the Atlantic coast and are loving life. I can't thank you enough for building this group. It was invaluable to me, expanding my skill set and keeping myself relevant in my work. Wish you continued success. So just wanted to read that since she sent that over a couple days ago.
Good for her.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
But hey, it's good to see you guys. Thanks, Michael.
Close it out. We will post our sessions as soon as we have them. So be on the lookout for it. And we will post those links as well to the jobs that we're posting in here in the meetup, and any other communication that we have, we'll post it. And then YouTube channel, this will be on there. So go to subscribe, like our channel. We have some great content. And if you have time, stay on. We'll just be talking and having a social hour. If not, we'll talk to you next month.